and to move in. Should that be helpful? I think it's fine. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I think I know most people here, but I'm Evelyn, and I'm excited to be here today to share with you on the theme of cultivating healthy rhythms of work and rest. So this is an ongoing learning process for me as well. So I'm basically sharing from what I've learned so far and also what I'm still continuing to learn about this topic. And hopefully we'll have some times for reflection as well. So hopefully there's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. Yes, and I'm also in between technology right now. So I have paper stuff, I have techie stuff, I have all sorts of things. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so technology piece one, changing slides. Yes, it works. Okay. So for those of you who know, I traveled a little bit earlier on the summer between May and June. And so I was away for about 5 weeks. 3 of those weeks was in Vietnam, and then 2 of those weeks in Thailand. So Vietnam was part of joining the tail end of a mission trip that we're sending students on, and then getting a chance to do part of the debrief and help with some of the new exploration aspect as well, because we're actually going into a new city, and in that new city we're trying to establish relationship with the school and figure out how can we serve the students there and work with the churches and different pieces like that. So I had a few different things on my plate in the Vietnam time, which I'll mostly be sharing from today. And then Thailand was mostly time to rest and reconnect, because I lived in Thailand for a year. So it was really nice to visit friends. And then my brother recently moved there as well. And so, getting a chance to revisit, which was really nice. But going into this trip, probably around March or April, I was already thinking, okay, I'm going to be on the move, and I've done this before where I've lived out of a suitcase. There's strategies on packing, and I've got my packing cubes. I've got all sorts of things that sort of help. But I also knew that as much as I also prepared physically for these things, one of the questions I had was, how can I foster a healthy rhythm of work and rest? Because there's a lot of things that could change. And of course, having margins is really important, a lot of these things, but without my usual rhythm and routine, sometimes it's really hard to make space to intentionally rest and to find ways to do the activities I like. So for example, I like rock climbing and bouldering, but it's hard to just find a place to go rock climbing everywhere you go. And then I usually like running too, but when it's 30 or 40 degrees out, I don't like running. Some of you might be really intense, but I'm I cannot run in 40-degree weather. So a lot of those things had to change. And so going in, I was okay, I need to find some ways to foster a healthy rhythm of work and rest. And so with that in mind, so this is a little bit of the team here. Actually, Jeremy's in this picture. Jeremy's visiting today in the back there. So that was the Vietnamese team, and they were there for about 5-6 weeks. And just had a chance to do a lot of ministry of students and do a lot of events, connections with locals, and go to church, and then work with the Vietnamese staff locally as well. So yes, there's a lot of other stories from that time, but I just perused through it. And then this is our Explore team, so the 5 of us. So there was actually 3 of us staff and 2 other male students. We went to a new city that we're hopefully going to send a longer-term team next fall. So we were there, which is not too bad at all, because we call it the beach city. So we have really nice beach there, and then we get to hang out with the students and do fun things on the beach. So this was actually just, I think a few days before we came, they sent out word where it's okay, we have friends coming from Canada, come out and have a fun time at the beach with us. And so a whole bunch of students showed up. And so beach parties are great, actually. Well, beach parties are also really different there. I mean, we had a church retreat last weekend at the beach, and so there are people playing volleyball we saw, and people out in the water, different things. In Vietnam, the beach parties, well, the one that we had, involved me jumping into a sack and doing a sack race across the sand, which I wasn't expecting. I felt like it was reliving elementary school life. I'm okay, this is part of adapting and being willing to step into your context. So we had sack race, we had a competition where you had to tie a balloon to your ankle, and then you had to run around and try to pop other people's balloons. It was gong show. It was craziness. Everyone's running around and So I was like, wow, I remember playing this game actually when I grew up in Asia. So I was like, wow, this is really different than what I thought. But I think through that, it just really helped foster a relationship with the students because they just felt more comfortable. And then we got a chance to chat with them more and like meet them at the coffee shop and have deeper conversations. So over the course of the time, like beginning to learn more about what's been happening is there's basically 2 staff members that go visit the city like every month. And when they go visit, they have a chance to connect with interested students. And there have been mission trip teams going in and out of the city, so teams from Malaysia, Singapore, Korea. And as a result, like they've actually seen a number of students come to faith on some of these like trips. And so there were, I think they told us in the last year they've seen like 30 students come to faith. But the challenge is actually following up with them and continuing to get them connected to churches and stuff because the staff aren't there. And so they're trying to do online sort of discipleship and Bible studies. But it's just really hard because students don't really want to do stuff online. So because of that, like, you know, we got a chance to meet them, and then some of the guys also got to meet with some of the male students, which was really nice because the 2 staff were 2 females. So we got a chance to really just join in what was happening. And then, as I was talking about earlier, I was like, okay, how am I going to have a good sort of rhythm of work and rest being in a new city and we're moving around and stuff? And so I got a chance to go on a hike. So it's interesting that Anna talked about hiking in like Iceland. So probably a little bit different because this was hiking in like hot weather. Even though, okay, we set off at 7 a.m. And so I was like, okay, we're ready to go. We're going to beat the heat. We're going to be up on this mountain and it's going to be great. But by 7 a.m., as we're walking up, we saw people coming down the mountain and we're like, this is not good. They must have started at 5 or something. So we were already behind on time starting at 7. So we were like, okay, we're going to do this, you know. And so we did. We did hike up to the top. If any of you know me, I don't really sweat much, which everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. And I'm like, no, it's not amazing. I just overheat and pass out. So I was in this situation where I'm like, oh, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it up this mountain and down. And also the interesting thing I learned is it's not like the hikes here in Vancouver and stuff where there's like shade and forests and like, you know, cool areas. It's like pretty barren. There's like maybe some shrubs, but there's not like really big trees. So I'm in the sun like almost all the way up. And so I'm like, oh, this is like pretty rough, right? So of course, like this was pretty interesting because this week while I was there, I was just reading through Psalm 121 and trying to memorize it too. And I was like, this is really appropriate. Now it's like really like words of desperation almost, you know, like where does my help come from? I'm looking to the mountains. Will I get to the top? Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, I think, you know, like, Lord, help me, you know. And particularly at some points, you know, it talks about the sun will not harm you by day, you know, and the moon not by night. And I was like, Lord, the sun is scorching hot. Can you do something about this? But also there's a part where it talks about, you know, and he will not let your foot slip. And as I was coming down, because I was saying there's not many trees holding the roots together, right? I'm like, almost like chanting this. I'm like, he will not let my foot slip. He will not let my foot slip. And just trying to like get onto some like, you know, ground that's stable. And so, yes, I made it back alive, as you can see. No twisted ankles either, so praise God. But I remember at one point, sitting next under this little tiny shrub. And I'm like crouched, like trying to like wedge myself underneath the shade of this little shrub. And I remember having my little fan. I had it set up on my bag, and I was like, because at that point, we had hiked to the top of the mountain, but Caleb here, who's the other student, was like, he wanted to check out the other 2 peaks, so it's actually a 3-peak hike. So the other 2 peaks weren't as far, but he's like, you know what, I'm just going to go check out the 2nd peak. And I'm like, okay, I'll stay by this little shrub. So I'm sitting here by the shrub, and I'm like, okay, Lord, help me, like, make it through, and we'll just wait for him, and hopefully, like, I won't be roasted into, like dried smithereens, I guess. But, like, here I am, have my little fan, I have a little spritzer bottle, and I'm spritzing myself, and on the other hand, I have a water bottle, so I'm drinking water, I'm spritzing myself, and then I also have this tiny little umbrella, but I have it wedged between my, like, neck, so I'm sitting here, like, trying to balance all these things, you know. It looked ridiculous, but I don't care if people see me. But at that point, I think, it was one of those moments where I'm like, okay, God, like, you know, you meet me in my physical need at this point. And, you know, since I was waiting for a while, it's like, okay, I had time to really think back on Psalm 121. And I realized, I'm like, oh, actually, I'm not just chanting this as like, I have a couple of former teammates who are athletes, and they say when they train and stuff like that, there are a lot of people that are really particular about like which pair of underwear they would wear for their game day or something, or they have a special bracelet, or they have all these things that they basically almost superstitiously go to like give them favor. And I think about it, I'm like, when I am reflecting on Psalm 121, it's not just like magical words that I chant, but actually Psalm 121 is a reminder of who God is. The passage isn't just about how much we can like chant through this passage and get some sort of favor from God, but actually it's a passage about who God is. And it says right at the beginning, it's like, my help comes from the maker of the heavens and the earth. So I think a huge part of learning what it means to have our orientation towards God is actually, first thing is acknowledging who God is. So we're going to do the ABCDs today. So that's just to help us remember. So A is for acknowledging who God is. And interestingly, when we got to the top of this mountain, this is what I saw. So I was like, Inukshuk? I'm like, that's sort of weird, who on earth like put this up here, and when I saw it, the first thing, it came to mind was actually Ebenezer. So, quiz for you guys. We had a Bible quiz last week at our F3C retreat, but this is like advanced levels. This was hard because I didn't quite know the answer until I looked it up. Where is Ebenezer mentioned in the Bible? Does anyone know? Other than Diana. Maybe she doesn't even know, actually. Everyone's like, I know the song. It's in the Old Testament. Great. Jess is onto something. We got half of the Bible eliminated. It's in the Old Testament somewhere. Okay, any other guesses? Where is it found? Bible quiz time. Okay, so it is an altar. And then it's... Okay, something happens. Okay. We're getting the piece together. No Bible references. No one knows where it is. Okay. Christina is like looking it up. Okay. It's actually in 1 Samuel. Yeah, so Samuel 17. I'll just read a short excerpt of it. But the context is actually the Philistines heard that the Israelites had assembled at Mizpah, and then the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. When the Israelites heard of this, they were afraid because of the Philistines, and they said to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he might rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." And then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrifices of the whole burnt offering to the Lord, and he cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that the men of Israel rushed out to Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them all along the way below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen, and he named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." So Ebenezer actually means stone of help. So, I guess there's multiple stones. But I was like, wow, how timely and how appropriate is it that, as I'm calling out for help from Psalm 121, I see this like set up, and we're like, and the interesting thing is 2 days later, because Caleb, who's very eager, wanted to hike this thing again. So he went with people 2 days later, and he said that it was gone. The whole thing was gone. So I was like, okay, that's really odd that this whole thing was set up, and did someone just like kick it down, or I don't know what happened in between. However, I think, it was a marker, like even for my life at that point. I was like, okay, actually this is a good reminder for me that God is my help, and he is the maker of the heavens and the earth. So I wanted to give us a moment, actually, to reflect on our own lives right now. And the question is, like, what have been Ebenezer moments in your relationship with God? When were the moments that you look back to that you can say, wow, God was my help? And many times we'll discover it's like, these were points of times where it's like, there actually isn't no other way. That if it isn't for God, I have no way of helping and rescuing myself. So I'm going to give you like a minute to think about that. Okay. So, to keep it lively too, if we can break into groups of like 2 or 3, And if you're comfortable, you could share about what the Ebenezer moment was for you. One or, if you could just share one of them, that would be great. In a group of 2 or 3 around you. And I'll give us a few minutes for that too. Cool. Break. Okay. Let's see if we can bring it back together. But I do think it is valuable for us to take time regularly to share of each other about these moments, because it is really a celebration of who God is, right? So I'll give you another story of a bit of an Ebenezer moment. And so we scheduled a campus tour, or the school was willing to take us on a tour on one of the days. And the time that they set for us was 2 p.m. in the afternoon. As I told you, it gets really hot in this place. So we're like, this is not ideal. Usually people don't even go out in the afternoon. They just stay at home and then they come out at nighttime sort of thing. So we're like, okay, 2 p.m. campus tour. And I'm just thinking in my brain, I'm like, okay, I need my spritzer bottle, I need my water, I need all my gear, what's my setup, But I think as we were meeting as a team, we're like, oh man, not only is 2 p.m. hottest time of the day could be, we also realized this trend that tended to happen, because one time we were hanging out at a coffee shop, for example, and around 2 or 3 o'clock, crazy thunderstorm. So, here we have the drizzle, in Vancouver. But there they have torrential rain. So it would just come and it would be pouring for half an hour, and then it would be clear skies sort of thing. And it just so happens it's right around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So it's either usually super hot or crazy thunderstorms, both of which is not ideal for a campus tour, as you realize. So then we're here in this meeting that we're having as a team, and I was like, okay, we got to pray, guys. Let's pray and ask God for favor in this. So I started praying, and I was like, God, it'll be great if you could send some clouds, the big fluffy type that can shield out the sun, but not the rainy type that would be torrential rain. And on top of that, ideally, it would be nice if we have a nice breeze as well while we're doing our campus tour. And then so my teammates are like, okay, Evelyn, that's really specific. I'm like, yeah, let's go to God, man. He can do it. I mean, we're going to trust him for this, And so I kid you not, lo and behold, the day came. As we stepped onto campus, nice, big, fluffy clouds. Not too dark that it would be raining, not the heavy ones, not too much, water in it that would rain. And then we did our whole tour, and not only that, we had a breeze as well while we're on this tour. It was wow, this is amazing. This is so comfortable here. So we went around the whole school, and it was really meaningful as well, because, the administrator that brought us around took us and explained some of the parts of campus. And we discovered that actually the school, the university was started by missionaries actually. And so they had a chapel, church building in the middle of the school. And the interesting thing is, they changed it. Technically Vietnam is a communist country. So they had transformed the chapel space to be a little exhibit of their history, and they had photos and stuff about the school history. And then in the front, where there would usually be maybe a altar like this and a cross, they had replaced it with a figure of their leader, Ho Chi Minh, and it's a gold figure. And we're like, okay, that's different. I've never seen a church building with a figure in the front, but okay. But also it was powerful too, because we prayed for campus afterwards, and one of my other teammates was like, it might seem in this place it's so it's these people have left God, and it's this place is no longer a church, but God still reigns in this place, and we can trust and believe in that. And I think yes, as we prayed in faith that this campus would one day be a place where the gospel will be known again, even in as simple small things of God is a God who's the maker of the heavens and the earth, and we can go to him and look to him to be our help in any situation that we're in. And so that day, is memorable for me, because it was another opportunity for us to learn to trust God and see who he is. And even if it did rain, even if it didn't work out the way that expected, it doesn't change who God is. And I think that was really important for us, throughout our time that we had there. So the second part I wanted to mention is part of acknowledging who God is also then means for us that we would also be able to be honest about our own limitations, which means that if God is the creator of the heavens and the earth, it means that we are not that. And in light of that, one of the things that I've, like, over the years been learning more and more about is it goes against our culture when we are able to say, like, what are our limits, and what if our approach was not just thinking of how we bypass our limitations, but actually instead we learn to embrace them. And that's really countercultural, because our culture around us says we want to be productive and efficient. How do we get more product out of less time and less resources that we put in, right? And I remember actually one time when I was in seminary classes in the U.S. One year, one of the profs mentioned something. He's like, somehow we thought that in the Bible, and we live as though the Bible's main value is efficiency. But if you really read it, it's like 40 years in the desert is not really efficient, you know? So I should have only taken a few weeks to get across that desert, not 40 years, you know? And so as he's explained, I was like, oh yeah, it's really true. And then one of the actually core values throughout the Bible is actually wisdom. Wisdom that begins with the fear of the Lord, which means knowing who he is and recognizing who he is. And then also wisdom in knowing, what does that mean in our time, in our context? What does that mean to be faithful with what he's given us? Which is actually within limits, actually. What he's given us that also is in the time and space that we are limited in. So with that in mind, it's like, I'll just give you also a bit of time to reflect on this question, which is, what are limitations you currently face right now? That if we take a moment to think about, okay, what are those limits? Is it time? Do you often feel like, I don't have enough time in the day? Is it space? Is it like, oh, we wish we had a bigger home, or we wish we had more space, even in our city, like different parks or different places that we could go to? Is it financial? You know, are we restricted because of financial limitations right now? And or is it physical? You know, I've had a shoulder injury for a while, and that's been annoying, I'll be honest. I was like, oh, like I injured it while I was climbing, and then I couldn't climb for a few months. And I realized, I was like, oh, this is really hard to learn to embrace, like, this limitation. But I think as we take a bit of an inventory, like, what are my current limitations right now? I'm just going to give you a minute or two to think about that. So hopefully as you reflect on those limitations, they also become spaces that God can meet you in. That as we learn to embrace these limitations, we also see that the God who made the heavens and the earth can meet us in those places. I wanted to share even a little bit about the local Vietnamese staff that I got to meet. So particularly two of them that I got to meet while we were spending time in the city. One of them is the crisis manager for the whole country. So she has a bit of responsibilities on her plate. So anytime that there's any crisis, whether it's like related to a security issue, like where people are in trouble, or like there's issues with maybe the government, or an issue with health and different things, like she would be the person to call. So she had a lot on her plate. And then the other person that I got to spend time with was the intern. So the two of them are the ones that would go to the city every month. And as I got to meet with them, I quickly like noticed that they are like on work mode like all the time. They're constantly like, oh my goodness, we have so many things to do. And for them, I think it's really hard to feel like they want to be in that city, the beach city, but they also have another city that they primarily serve in. And so with especially 30 students coming to faith, they're like, how are we going to meet these people? How are we going to like track with them? So they constantly felt this pressure of like, oh my goodness, we need to do more, we need to do more. And I noticed that because like when we planned out our schedule for that week that we spent together, I told them early on too, I'm like, okay, so you know, we have a few things in the evening, like beach parties, church event, and all this stuff. So when we have evening activities, we're going to take the morning off. So from basically we'll start the day like after lunch, and then we'll do ministry and stuff. And then slowly I began to realize, like, you know, we agreed on the schedule, but then they started calling us, and it's like, hey, do you want to meet someone at 9 in the morning? And it's like, remember how we talked about not really doing stuff, like, ministry related until later in the day, so we could, like, have a portion of the day where we can, like, rest and stuff? And he said, oh, yeah, but there's these students. And then I was like, okay, like, trying to navigate those pieces. I'm like, okay, culturally, I want to be respectful, but also I need to let you know we cannot go from 9 a.m. in the morning to like 10 p.m. at night. So realizing that, it's like, okay, maybe there's a bit of these unhealthy patterns and stuff, but like what's going on a deeper level is like this sense of, oh my goodness, like we need to get all this stuff done, and like it's really hard to actually acknowledge that we just can't do all of this. So I think, at points I felt the pressure, and then also learning that, not only do I like want to see a behavioral change, I guess, or that we could be on the same page of what we choose to do over time, but really realizing I think God is doing something on a deeper heart level for all of us, because he's asking some deeper questions of, why is it that you can't rest? Why is it that we can't stop doing things? And so as I reflected on it, it's like I think two passages come to my mind about rest and Sabbath. Old Testament references again. So here's an interesting thing. Did you guys know that observing the Sabbath, this command that's in the Ten Commandments, first of all, it's the longest section. I guess all the other commands are like, do not kill, do not covet, do not commit adultery. And then there's this huge chunk about the Sabbath. And it appears in Exodus. And this is what it says in Exodus. It says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Cool reference again, right? Similar to Psalm 121. Acknowledging that God is the maker of the heavens and the earth. And so as I thought about it, I was like, oh, okay, like that's interesting that this is referenced. And it's interesting because when I think about it, I'm like, God doesn't need to rest. He's not like, oh my goodness, I was so tired and exhausted from making all this stuff. I just need a long break and vacation. But actually, he's providing for us an example. He's showing us, actually, as human beings, you are limited. You need to rest. And the heart and root of it is actually this reminder that God is God. So every time that we choose, or not actually we are making a choice, when we are unable to actually cease from our activities and choose to rest, there's actually at the root of it pride, because we're saying basically, I need to be God. And as convicting, it sounds crazy and bizarre, but I think there have been times in my life, especially when I went through a season of burnout, I realized I was saying a lot of things like, oh my goodness, I need to do this, I should do this, but I found myself really hard to even finish the sentence, like, what do I want to do, and what do I get to do? And even that mentality is really different, right? And so I realized, deep down, there's a pride issue because I don't believe that God is the one who not only makes the universe and made the heavens and the earth, but he actually sustains it and is not on my shoulders to keep everything going. And so the first part of observing the Sabbath is actually remembering that I am not God, that he is God, and I actually can rest because I don't need to keep everything going. So that's a good reflection maybe for us as well, is what are the areas that you feel like there's a lot of I need to or I should do? And I find it really hard to step back from those things. And quiz again. There's another part of the Bible that talks about observing the Sabbath. Do you know where it is? Hey, who was that? Christina. Okay. Jenna Lynn should know too, as I talked to her 2 weeks ago about this stuff. Anyway. Yeah. Give other people a chance. Deuteronomy, yeah. And it's interesting because the passages are almost identical except for this part about the Sabbath. But it says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Same. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that your Lord, your God, brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So I didn't notice this until I read the book Rest of God by Mark Buchanan. And he's a pastor on the island, actually, in Victoria. And he brought this up where it's like, why do you think it's different? Why is it that in the first one, it talks about, God creating the heavens and the earth. That's why observe the Sabbath. And in this one it says, observe the Sabbath because you need to remember that you were slaves in Egypt. And I'm I think there's something that's highlighted for us where observing the Sabbath, choosing to rest, actually is working through a deeper heart issue in our lives. For this second one in Deuteronomy, if you think about it, when the Israelites were in Egypt, guess how many days off they got? 0. They did not have an extended healthcare plan and insurance plan. They weren't set up to be let's see how you could flourish in this place. No, they were slaves. They were moving bricks. They were building things. They were worked to the bone. And that's why they were crying out to God for help, because they were we're dying here, we're being oppressed by the Egyptians. And so they were in this circumstance where they worked so hard that, they were we are not free to live out the flourishing life that really God has made for us. And so when it's brought up in the context of Sabbath, actually, God is actually saying, do you know how ridiculous this is? That I have brought you out of Egypt, where you were enslaved. And for some reason, you keep acting like you're still enslaved because you don't have true freedom. You continue to work in a way that's, oppressing the poor, which actually a lot of times in the Old Testament is mentioned. It's like there's injustices amongst you. You don't pay your workers fairly. You're oppressing the poor. And so many times, actually, at the root of it is because we don't believe that, well, first, that God can rescue them, but also our identity and our worth and value somehow gets entangled into our work. And so we begin to find our sense of value in what we do and what we produce instead of who God says we are. So this is an important question where it's like, well, what does work mean for you right now? So whether you're a student in school or whether you're working in an office or doing different things, what does work mean for you in your life? Because the two are really connected, work and rest. So depending on how you answer this question, you'll begin to realize, like, oh, actually, there are things that maybe I really enjoy in work, and maybe you have connections with people, and you feel like there's meaningful relationships being built. So God meant for work to be good, because, I mean, Adam and Eve, they were actually, like, stewarding and taking care of the Garden of Eden and stuff. So there was work to do, but something changed right after the fall. Work became something that almost, like, they had to prove themselves through. Maybe there's competition between each other. Maybe there's pride. There's all these things that actually start to taint what work really means. So for us to be aware, especially because we spent 40 hours or even more basically working. We spend most of our lives working or studying or like having a vocation basically. So our relationship with work is actually really important. So that's an invitation for you to consider. What does that mean, and how is God maybe redeeming my understanding of work? Because that will play into how well you can rest as well. So review, acknowledge who God is, be honest about your limitations, and the next thing I want to bring up is actually there's an invitation to cease work and celebrate. So these are some of the staff I was telling you about. They're the two women on the top there. They're the ones that go in every month. And so with them, as I learned quickly, because if they could choose, and regularly they work 60, 70 hours a week or something crazy. So I realized we really almost need to plan out something that's like restful together. And so the crisis manager person, she was like, oh, I really want to exercise and do more activities and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, why don't we go, we can work out. Because it's hot in the afternoon, but there was one day we had stuff in the morning and stuff in the evening, so we're supposed to rest in the afternoon. I was like, why don't we do a workout together, because it's too hot to run and be outside, but we could do a workout video. And so, yeah, she was like, oh, okay, but I have a phone call. I'm like, why do you have a phone call? And she's like, oh, I have some meetings. I'm like, but we're supposed to rest. Why do you have meetings planned? And she's like, okay, it's a 1-hour meeting. I'm like, okay, so you still have about 2 hours left, so we could do a workout and hang out. And she's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'll come to your apartment, and we will do the workout in your apartment. That's right. So literally I went there and then knocked on her door, and we did a workout video together, which wasn't too bad. It was an air-conditioned apartment, so we survived the workout mostly. And then interestingly, the next day, it was her that actually proposed. She's like, actually, instead of workout, do you think we can just go for a swim at the beach tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go for a swim at the beach. That's a great idea. We live literally 30 seconds from the beach. This is what you can do every time you come, actually. So we went for a swim, and actually she was like, wow, this is really good. And she's like, I love being able to be in the water and stuff. And I was like, yeah, isn't that a good idea? Maybe in the future you could go for a swim at the beach, in the afternoons. And so that began a bit of a different trend. Even though I was there and I was like, God, I'm ready to serve and do ministry, I think the ministry he was inviting me into was learning to actually rest together with the local staff there. And then the other girl, the ice cream too, she's a funny one. She doesn't really work out or exercise much at all, but she's young, and so she's still, doing okay. However, her one thing that she's really loves is ice cream. So there was this one day we're eating ice cream together, and she was halfway eating it, and then she's like, suddenly exclaims with joy. She's like, "Oh, you guys won't believe this!" And we're like, "Oh, what's the matter? What's the matter?" And she's like, they were doing this reward thing where basically in the ice cream cone you could win things. So she won another ice cream. So I was like, what? What are the chances that all of us is like you win the extra ice cream? So in my mind, I'm like, it reminded me it's like God's thoughtfulness, of He knows what we need and what we enjoy and delight in. And He actually, out of all of us, like it was her that got this extra ice cream. Although she has like 3 ice cream a day, which I don't think is too healthy. So I'm like, we got to work on that side of things. And she doesn't really exercise that much. But in many ways, I just think of like, if we start to notice, God is actually really thoughtful towards us. So throughout our days, like, thinking through, God's attentive and knows our needs. How does He meet us in those needs, Whether it's just me simply having an umbrella or a spritzer bottle, those things also is a reminder of His faithfulness as well. And then the other picture is like climbing because, I actually couldn't find a place to climb for most of the time I was in Vietnam, except the last day I was there before going to Thailand. I had one day that I had the evening off, and I was like, I'm going to look for a climbing gym. And also I'm going to get someone to come with me as well, which will help with translation and stuff, but also because I think I started to learn, I'm like, okay, the Vietnamese staff really need to like rest as well. And then this other intern that was in the city was like free that evening. So I was like, let's go climbing. And then she came in a jacket and everything. I'm like, it is like 35 degrees out. I do not know how you're wearing a jacket and climbing in it, but that's okay. Maybe your body is trained for that. So we climbed, and I think it was really good because part of it is like in climbing, you'll like also have times when you just fall and when you just can't figure something out, but you're just trying something, And I think it's really healthy as well because a lot of times connected with this sense of work and having to produce and be accomplished is a sense of like a fear of failure. We don't want to fail. And so I find one of the biggest lessons actually in climbing is like, okay, I'm actually learning how to fall and learning how to fail and try things out. And through that, it's like really good discipleship conversations, that was happening there. And then I found out because later on I had a chance to stay with her at the apartment complex she's living at. Because the climbing gym is like about 30 minutes away from her house, so it's really far, and it's expensive for a Vietnamese person to get a climbing gym pass. But I find out she has a pool right in her apartment building. And I was like, what? You have a pool here? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, do you go swimming? And she's like, oh, maybe gone once or twice. I'm like, I would be down here every day if I were you, And it wasn't even that busy. Like, there's not that many people. And so, of course, then I was like, okay, we got to go swimming then tomorrow. So me and then the intern as well as a student that was like they live in the same apartment, we all went swimming. And I think through that it was like learning how to rest also is like a practice. Because sometimes we're so ingrained in a way where it's like we're like pushed to be like we got to work, we got to do things. And then maybe if we work really hard, then maybe we have some vacation time off. But I think God has a really different perspective, which is like actually you start with rest. You can rest in me because the work is already accomplished. You don't need to work to prove yourself. You don't need to work to produce something so that you would have a name for yourself. And so when He reorients our identity in Christ, then actually we're free to work. And so that's a really different approach from our culture around us, which is like work so that maybe you have a vacation day. Work so that you can prove yourself. But instead, the gospel says, like, no, you don't need to prove yourself, so you can freely work. And that's where you also express worship and who you are, you truly are. So with that in mind, thinking of what are the patterns of rest and replenishments in your life that's working or that you would like to try. And this is a cool part, too, because I'm like, we're in a community of people that maybe all have different ways of resting. There's people that like camping. There are people that don't like camping as much. I won't name names. But there's just different ways of resting, and I think part of it is we can like learn from each other. Even last weekend when we were out at the beach, walking on the beach, it's like some people, sat on the log. Some people were, like touching the sand out in the water, And so I think in our differences, it's actually really awesome that we're a part of a community that can rest together and in our diverse ways as well. So just to put that in mind and also encourage you to share how you guys rest together. And then the last part I wanted to share with you is, so A, B, C, D, right? A, acknowledge who God is. B, be honest about your limitations. C, seize work and celebrate. And then D is to delight in the gospel. So if all of this, if I was just telling you, it's like, here are great strategies to rest and do things, that would be so limited, because at the root of it, we need to remember the gospel, because that's the foundation in which we orient ourselves towards work and rest. So the gospel, really encompassing, like, some of the passages I shared, is about the maker of the heavens and the earth. He came to set us free by paying a ransom we could not afford. So that's why in the Deuteronomy and Exodus passage, when it talks about we need to know who God is, and out of that place, if he's the one who's rescued us, we don't need to continue to run back to Egypt or run back to a place to find our sense of worth, but we find our sense of worth and identity in who he says we are and what Jesus has already done for us. And it's significant because if you look back to the story of Egypt, there were 10 plagues that happened, right? Locusts, flies, all these things that happened. What was the last plague? Do you guys remember the last thing that happened? Yeah, the death of the firstborn. So that was like, they were saying like wailing in the whole of Egypt, because every single person, every Egyptian, even their livestock, their firstborn were dead, in that one night. All of them died. So everyone lost someone in their family, basically. And if we look at the gospel, it's, in some ways, I see it maybe, it's a foreshadow, right? That God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, was willing to give up his firstborn, Jesus Christ, for us on the cross, so that we are no longer enslaved, that we can actually truly be set free. That when we're marked with the blood of the Lamb, which in many ways just means like what he has done for us on the cross is actually, we can say it's sufficient and enough, that actually gives us freedom to live out the life he's called us to. And also, referring back to the Samuel passage that I had read, I don't know if any one of you guys noticed, when it says, that when they said, it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 8, it says, they said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And he cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. Do you know why God answers us and rescues us? Because he's ultimately paid the price. This suckling lamb was just like Samuel pleading on behalf of the Israelites. But we have the great lamb that was slain for us already, who's made a way for us, so that actually in all that we do, we are never forsaken. We are never abandoned. We are never left on our own demise. He has completely rescued us, like once and for all. There's nothing more that we can do in our work and even in our rest, because even in our culture, it's like saying that, well, one day when you retire, then you can do all the things you want to do. And I'm like, well, we can live a flourishing life already, right here, right now, in our work, in our rest, in our retirement days. Actually, our life can flourish and we can have a life abundant because of what Christ has already done. So at the root of it, it's like we need space to reflect and be reminded of the gospel. And so my encouragement to you is, let's continue to share these stories. We share the stories of the Ebenezer, like where are we setting these altars in our life? Where has God rescued us? But we continue to remember that actually the ultimate rescue has already happened, that Jesus has already come. And that's why the gospel for us is hope. The gospel is rest. The gospel is the way that we actually continue to flourish in our lives today. So that's my message for you. Thanks, guys.